The Bo and Luke Show. Inspiring you to be better, know better, and do better. Welcome to the Bo and Luke Show, with a diverse lineup of guests, from NFL players to CEOs. It's real and it's raw. From the Hale Media Group, here are your hosts, Robert Bo Brabo and Luke Carignan.
Well, Bo and Luke Nation, welcome to the show. First off, before we get started, Bo and I just wanted to extend some gratitude out there. This is our 4th episode. We've barely done any advertising on this, and it was definitely outside of the box for both of us. I just wanted to thank you, the listeners. We've had a great response, over 200 downloads so far, and really good feedback from everybody out there. We heard that people are getting value out of this. So we just wanted to say thank you for listening. And, after this, I guess for this episode, we have something really special here. I'm actually interviewing the co-host, Bo Brabo himself, today on his new book that just released last week. Bo, want to give us a little rundown?
Yeah, so very exciting times. And first, I just want to second Luke's sentiments on gratitude for everybody that's taken a moment to download the episode or episodes and listen and hear what our guests have to say, hear what we have to say. And we truly hope that you get something out of each one of them. That's our intent, to bring inspiration and light the fire, if you will. So we really do appreciate you taking a moment to listen to us and even spread the word and tell others. Yeah, so Luke, February 26th, it has been less than 2 weeks, and my new book, From the Battlefield to the White House to the Boardroom, Leading Organizations to Values-Based Results, came out on Amazon. It has, since it started, it has topped the top 100 business leadership books, hot new release on Amazon. So I'm very, very, very excited about that. People are engaging, sending me photos that their book arrived. They're posting on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Instagram. It's like, hey, look what I just received in the mail. I had a gentleman send an email. Because in the back of the book, it has all the information on how to get in touch with me. He sent a copy of the book. He was sitting down to dinner, and he had the book on the table with a bottle of wine and a glass of wine. So I thought, oh, cool. Maybe it pairs well with a good red wine. I don't know. It's just been super, super, super exciting to see people responding with some incredible feedback. I appreciate you taking a moment to interview me on the book and what's contained therein. I guess this is probably, even though I thanked some people in the book, this is a very verbal way to get it out there and show even more gratitude. The gentleman who wrote the foreword was a professor that I met at the University of Michigan going through grad school, Mike Barger. But he was a co-founder of JetBlue Airways. And before that, Navy Top Gun, chief instructor and pilot. And when I met Mike at the university, I just knew that this was a gentleman that I had to talk to and get into this book and collaborate. And not only did he give me hours and hours and hours of his time talking about JetBlue and how they started and how they brought values into their organization and leadership principles and how the executive team responded to all of that and to their crew members. He agreed to write the foreword, which just kind of, I couldn't even know what to say. Thank you is not enough. I'm very humbled to have such an individual with such incredible accomplishment in life to say, yeah, I would love to write the foreword. So that is just really cool. Thank you, Mike.
Well, I'm sure he appreciates you writing this book too. It seems like it really aligns with what he writes about in your forward as well. But I wanted to call something out real fast, and I think, listener out there, you're going to get a lot from this too. Bo, tell us about the courage to write this, right? Because I think that a lot of people can be the critic sitting there on the sidelines. It takes a lot of courage to go out there and do something like this and put it out there. And I got to tell you, man, I think you hit a home run. And for listener out there, I think from this podcast, you'll get a lot of this as well, just from listening. But this is a book where, Bo, man, honestly, I couldn't put it down. And it's one of those books where you can read it in one day and in your personal and professional life. actually make changes in behavior to get better results, whether they're small or big. But again, those small things will go turn into the big ones. Tell us about the courage that it took to go out and write this.
That's the number one when you do research on people who are thinking about writing a book, and you have some fear, and we talk about fear in the book as well and how to overcome fear. But one of the biggest roadblocks to an author is putting yourself out there, right? So it's the best thing about writing a book is that people are going to read it, and the worst thing about writing a book is that people are going to read it. So it's the same thing, and you got to at some point you got to decide which one overrules the other, because there's no way that you don't get a certain amount of critics, right? Um, but then for me, it was look. I brought this down to a very, very individual level in my mind, in that I've had experiences throughout life and in the workplace where someone will thank you for doing something. And I thought, that's the only thing I really need to hold on to. So if I write this book and I put the last 30 years of my life and what I believe about leadership and values, and how those really help in any type of organization, and then tell the stories to make it real and make it personal, put some Velcro to the content, if you will, for people, so that, when you sit down and read it, it's 100, right about 150 pages. If you had a few hours, you could just sit there and read the whole thing, and then go back and reference later. So my goal was really to write a book that you could do that. It's not a textbook, but you can learn a lot from it. And I thought, I'm so passionate. It's where my passion is. And if I can just help one person, and if one person said, thank you, I really learned something from the book, and I've made this change, and now I'm seeing better results, then I really succeeded. I think you got to bring it down. At least for me, it's bringing it down to that one person, right? I often draw on an experience when I was in Germany in the Army, and part of our responsibilities was to help people get command sponsorship, so that a soldier could bring their wife and their spouse and their children over to Germany. So there's a whole big process, and you have to get visa status for them. So you're working with the consulate in Frankfurt, and it's a big process. And oftentimes families are separated for a certain amount of time until that gets done. So I often put myself in, it's empathy. It's putting yourself in their shoes and saying, okay, if I was separated from my family, I want this. I would take and do everything I could to get this done. So that's how I approached every single one of those actions. And then just at random, one evening, walking through the exchange on the base, which is like a department store on a military base. I'm just shopping, and it was with my family, and a soldier and his spouse came up to me, and I didn't know them. I never didn't recognize them, but they asked me if I was Chief Brabo, and I said, "Yep, that's me." And the wife actually started crying, and she said, "I just want to say thank you for everything that you did in helping us get from the United States to Germany to join their spouse and reunite, bring the family back together." And that moment, Luke, meant more to me than like any Army medal that I ever received, or any achievement, because I think that's where it comes. It all comes together with helping other people. And honestly, it sounds simple, but for me, finding the courage in that I might help someone, and I don't have to know them. I don't have to know who they are. It could be somebody sitting in Australia and they buy the book. That's okay. And they find some type of value, and this helps them do something. Even if it's finding courage to go to work and do a little better, or lead a little better, or change their leadership style in a little way that then helps them be a better leader in their workplace, or in an organization, or at home, or whatever. I just had to stay focused on that.
Well, and one of the things, and you touched on a lot there. One of the things that really resonated with me about the book and how you can make these changes is, I feel like there's a lot of books and a lot of information out there that to say like, hey, here's the changes that you need to make, da, da, da. Everyone, I think, has a general idea of what it takes to be successful, or they see the end game with success in business, success in their marriage, their family, whatever it is. You drill it down way back further as is that the root is actually set in the behaviors that you choose every single day. Right? So, like, when the story that you gave me where it said, "Hey, thank you so much," from the family, that was a result of the behaviors that you were doing on a daily basis. And whether it's in your personal or professional life, can you talk about, how you discovered that these behaviors matter so much? Because, like, when we go through the book now, like I said, I couldn't put it down, but now when I finished it, I said, you know what? It's those little behaviors that I have the choice to do every single day, whether they're even the small ones that are going to make the biggest difference. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so I know for me it was definitely a journey. It wasn't something that like just all I was doing from day one. I think at some point, and a lot of times it's just in reflection, looking backwards, that you look at what you did to make something work really well, and it's taking time to throughout life. It's taking a moment. Maybe you do it every week, every month, and you kind of just do some self critiquing of things that you've done over the past month or two or whatever, and not just look at the things that you did well and they had a good result, but you really got to kind of look at the things you didn't do well, that didn't turn out the way you thought they would, and why, and really draw that back to a personal level as to what could you have done better, uh, or what you did really really well that you'd want to make sure you do that again and again and again, right? So it's finding the things you're really good at, and then doing those things, thousands of times. I always say, hindsight is 2020. So I can look back and say, there were pivotal points for me in my life, where I write about those in the book and where those kind of points were. And I think for me, it's the not to give the whole book away, but I really learned a lot about myself when I went to airborne school to jump out of airplanes. That was, everybody says you got to have mental and physical toughness. I don't know that I knew what both of those really, really were, and how they play so well together in a single event, as to actually get trained so that you can, be an Army paratrooper and jump out of planes and, have your weapon and your full combat gear, and and that's it's like one of the stories, or I compare it in the book to running a marathon. You develop the behaviors physically, mentally, because at some point the physical stuff will break down on you. Your body's just not going to go, but then it's the mental toughness to keep going. And I think that's what a lot of people face in the workplace. It's more of mental fitness than it is physical fitness, and it's being able to demonstrate the right behaviors, and draw on your own personal values to get through the tough times. Did that answer your question?
It did. And I wanted to mention that too. That kind of leads me to my next point. So for all our listeners out there, and I'm sure you can look up Bo and check him out. You obviously see how polished he is and can hear him on the podcast. He's kind. He's got a lot of great traits. But from reading this book, Bo, you're a badass. That, like, I didn't know like the extent of how big of a badass you are until like I read through the battlefield portion of the book. So we obviously it's battlefield to the White House to the boardroom, folks. The battlefield part is nuts. Bo talks about jumping out of airplanes. There's a chapter where it talks about paratrooper Brabo here, and it is absolutely insane. I'm picturing you going through here, and there you were talking about like some of just even in school, some of the drills that they had you run through, like waking up in the morning, to me just sounded daunting the way that they had you guys doing it.
Yeah, that was at Warrant Officer Candidate School, and that was quite an experience. But that again, that's really where you just have to, everything's coming together in leadership and followership. You know, you can't be a great leader without being a great follower, a great listener, and so forth. And it just kind of all came together in that, and having to work through those things as a team. For anybody listening, if you haven't picked up the book, without sounding too much like a salesman, there's some value in that. And it's not just about values. It's about bringing all of your values together and how you behave. It's really about your behaviors, and then the behaviors of everybody combined over time, determining the culture that you're in. And we're not just talking about, culture of your whole company, but it's your team, it's your group. It can be the culture of your family. And you can kind of just bring that all together. But yeah, so, badass, I don't know. Thanks. That's a compliment.
Listeners, he was talking about when it doesn't get much more badass than this, about jumping out of an airplane, middle of the night, can't see a thing, and has to figure out when the ground is coming in the complete dark. So, Bo, that's something that really shocked me. You said your bag would hit the ground, and then you had how long to figure out before your feet would hit?
It's only seconds. So and when you're jumping out of an airplane in the middle of, well, even with whether it's daylight or darkness, and you have your rucksack, and it's filled with gear and so forth, and it's kind of sits. You got your parachute on your back. You got the reserve kind of right in front of you, and then your rucksack sits almost like it's sitting between your legs, but it's hooked to it's connected to a very, like, a 50 feet long, uh, really durable rope, right? It's a cord, um, but it's about 50 feet, 50, 60 feet long, if I remember right. But long enough so when even in the darkness, you can still kind of see the silhouette on the horizon and so forth. Your eyes adjust enough to bring in some light and see the horizon, or you're counting and you think how much further you have to go. And then there's just a cord that you pull, and it drops the rucksack. So the rucksack starts to drop and fall, but it's on a cord, so it's going to stop, right? And then you're literally just waiting to hear. That's when your ears kind of have to be, perk up, to hear it thump, hit the ground, right? And when that hits the ground, I mean, it's coming. You're next. So you're in position to do the best. It's called parachute landing fall that you can do. And yeah, one of the key rules, basic parachuting, is don't anticipate the ground. You just got to let it happen. Yeah, people break their legs when they try to anticipate, because your mind just can't. It just seems like your mind can't catch up to the how fast you're actually. I mean, you're not doing mathematical equations in your head, to try and, accurate ones anyways, to figure out how fast you're falling at the rate of descent, how much you have before you hit the ground. People make the mistake of, they see the ground and they think they can, like, put their foot out. It's kind of almost like it can be a natural tendency. That's why you have to go through so much training. And when they do that, and you stick your leg out and you hit the ground, which is like concrete, and you're doing, 12, 13 miles per hour is how fast you're going, it's going to snap your leg just like that.
That's insane. So yeah, guys, it's badass. I wasn't kidding. Total badass. What we talk about in the show is to be, know, and do better. Talk about the Army and how those values really formed you. Because now we're kind of trying to put those in actions with the podcast and everything around that. And, that's deeply rooted within the Army, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say I feel very, very fortunate to have had that come into my life at a young age, at age 17, because up to then, I didn't know it. I really didn't know. I had no idea what values were, mission statements are, what vision statements are, what are values, how are they even applied, right? So learning the Army values, and I put them all in the book, just for anybody who has, like, really no idea of what values are, how they come to fruition, what the actual definitions of values are. And I think that's a place where even companies in the corporate world kind of fall short. They'll list out a value, or a sentence for what their value is or their values are, but there's a lack of definition in what types of behaviors go behind the values that they said they embody. Those values, when it was the first set of organizational values I had ever heard, so I started to home in on those and try to really understand what they meant. And Uh, I think the Army did a great job. They're very good at creating acronyms. So it's actually the acronym leadership for loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. You tie it to something you can remember, give it definitions, talk about it. It's all over performance evaluation. So you almost can't escape it, even if you wanted to. But they really started to shape the foundations for me. So even when you walk into an organization after Army life, right? Because not all companies have defined values. You have your own values to play on. And the reason I put them in the book for people was that if you are part of an organization that doesn't have defined values, if anything, for yourself as an individual, these are 7 values that anybody could adopt, and they're very honorable values, right?
Yeah, this is amazing. One thing I also noticed about the values specifically within the Army, and even when you got to the White House, everything seemed like, things were complicated, right? Of course, things were complicated because, you have lives on the line. And this kind of gets back to what Mike Barger talked about with JetBlue. But it just seems like there's so much common sense rooted in all of the values that they have and the way that they convey those to people. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So like even going back to what Mike's comments in the book and at JetBlue, and then just in his foreword, what I really liked that he did, and he explained it incredibly well, was the leaders and talking about it from a military perspective, but it applies to any organization, and that's what I love about putting all of this on paper. You don't it doesn't have to it doesn't have to be a Fortune 500 company. It doesn't have to be the military. You might be a volunteer leading a Boy Scout troop or a Girl Scout troop, and you're trying to teach young minds about how to be good leaders, and it's those seeds that you're planting. And one of the things that happens in many organizations is the environment, and it's the acronym VUCA, VUCA, that he talked about for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous environments. I mean, you just take a moment to think about anything that you have done in life, and you can probably find times when that applied to the organization, company, whatever that you were part of. And then how do you deal with that? How do you get through that? So if we do nothing else, Luke, and for the listener, for you listening, the earlier in life that you start understanding that your behaviors matter, and you're tying your behaviors to those behaviors determine your values. Find the right ones that you're passionate about and your purpose and your why in life. You will just continue to grow into the leader that you want to be.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I feel like everybody that I admire, right, that I've come across, personally and professionally, they all do these things. I would say that they have great values, but you're 100% right because these values obviously stem back from how they behave in every interaction that I have with them or that I see them have with other people. And that's where I think that that real respect comes from. What you've done here is not only capture that, hey, the reason why we have respect for people like that is because of the behaviors that they exhibit, but taking it a step further and said, hey, this isn't hard to do. You can actually implement this immediately. Once you stop listening to this podcast, you can start exhibiting behaviors that you want to have, that other people want to have. And over time, and that's the entire thing that you're saying here is over time, that's what turns into the actual results that you're going to get. Am I explaining that correctly?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely explaining that just perfect, because that's the whole part of the book, right? Is I tried to differentiate between writing a professional book and says, here's what I think. And I tried to put in there, just like the concept for our show about doing better. It's like, here are some things you can actually go do and start to see results. And the big one for me is respect. And I've always seen respect as, and maybe it's because of the military in me. It's not a noun. It's not something that just sits there. It's action. Any of our values should be actions, which that's behaviors and how we behave every day. And one of the things in respect I call in this model I put in there was for stand up. If you want to show somebody respect, and they come, you're sitting down and they come up to you, just stand up, talk to them, look them in the eyes. It happens a lot in corporate America, especially in office environments, where you're working at a computer, your laptop or whatever, right? And someone comes up to talk to you and you're not really listening because you're still fumbling around on your computer, whether you're sending an email or you're working on something, right? And if they need something from you and you have a moment, stop what you're doing. If you're sitting down, stand up, look at them, talk to them. That one simple action, what you're demonstrating is so far beyond the simple action of standing up. You are behaving in a way that shows that person that you care about what they have to say. It's just, there's a lot with it. We could talk about that one thing for hours.
I feel like society has taken these things and now people say, "Oh, these are the little things that matter." I'd argue to say, and even though you kind of make this point in the book, these aren't the little things anymore. These are actually the big things that matter. They're just really easy to do. I think that's why they get categorized as little things, right? Well, a little thing you can do to show respect is to stand up whenever somebody walks in the room. You know what? Maybe a little thing, but it's a big deal.
Yeah, I was reading actually an article this morning on leadership in the future for an interview that the World Economic Forum did with the dean of the Wharton School. So Wharton, very top business school, and he's talking about leadership in the future. And I actually tied what he's talking to many things that I'm like, that I agree with it completely, but I don't think it's new. I think it's just a new thought. It's not new action, it's new thought. And, he's talking about like Generation Z, they're very mission driven. They want to know why, they have a purpose. So that's our youngest generation in the workforce today. And this isn't about debating, if previous generations didn't care about the mission or didn't, wasn't important to them. But it's obviously today studies show the Generation Z mission and vision and purpose is important to them. So if you're a leader in the workplace, you can't just be like a dictator and dictate, telling people what to do. It's not going to motivate them and it's not going to influence them. You have to do what? And it's even if you're the CEO, you have to show them respect. So when they're asking you questions and they want to know why we're doing what we're doing, you have to take the moment to stand up, to look at them, and to tell them and explain it to them. And that's the only way you're going to get buy-in. Well, I don't see that being any different than what I've experienced. I think it's incredibly true, but when you're going to war, if you will, and you're in the military, your leader will issue an operations order that says this is what we're going to go do. Well, in that document, it's a written document, but then it's the leader's actually presenting it to your group, your platoon, your company, whatever the case might be, and you're having that exact discussion. It's, hey folks, this is what we've been charged to do. This is the mission. This is why we're doing it. We have the skills. This is where we're going to go. This is how we're going to do it. These are the objectives that we're setting out to accomplish, and so forth. So I think, I read in between the lines, almost like there's more military leadership type things that are now coming to be viewed as very important types of characteristics and attributes that leaders in corporate America need to have today in order to successfully go into the future. We just don't call it out as necessarily as military leadership. It's just the things leaders need to do and to grow into in order to be successful going forward. You got to start with yourself, your personal values, and how you act every day, because everybody's watching.
Yeah, that's totally true. And then the stakes are never higher than when you're in the military or even doing what you've done. I mean, and first off, here's some gratitude for you. I mean, thanks for your service, man. I mean, I don't think I say it enough, but for the listeners, Bo is badass is the way to put it. He's protected us, our civilization, he's protected our president, and now just in a different light, he's protecting employees at the organization that he works at. And he's just kind of always been a protector, I guess, haven't you?
Yeah, if you look at it in that way, right? It's taking care of it's just taking care of people. You can read it a lot, and this goes back to, it's a sounds like it's a very simple thing, right? And you can read article after article after article that says, number one characteristic of great leadership is to care about your people. Um, and I think I've never heard anyone or seen anyone even debate that, right? Even people who demonstrate that they're not very good leaders, they'll tell you, yes, that's the most important thing is to care about your people. But then you don't do it. You don't behave that way. You don't act that way. You don't demonstrate that you care. So it becomes one of those things that sounds simple, but it's not simple.
How do you I'm putting myself in the shoe of the listener. So listener out there, I hope this will be a good nugget for you. Bo, how do you stay consistent with this? Because, once I get off this podcast, I'm going to be charged up, right? I'm going to show good behaviors. I'm going to go stand up when my wife walks in the room, and it's going to be awesome. Later this afternoon, I'm probably going to stop doing that. And then by the midweek, it's going to all go to the wayside. How do you, in your experience and for the listeners, how do they stay consistent with this? Because another thing that you mentioned is, behaviors themselves aren't enough. You need time. And that's the thing. So how do you stay consistent during that time?
Yeah, you got to have, we talked about this with Jared Wilson in episode 2, and something that he learned from Michigan head coach Jim Harbaugh was battle rhythm. So, military term for battle rhythm, fine. But in this context, it's really just about having a set of tasks or behaviors that you set up for yourself and you write them down that you're going to, it's a schedule, it's your calendar. How are you going to behave every day? What are you going to do? How do you fill the white space on your calendar, or do you let the day just kind of take shape itself? It truly is, to take yourself to that next level. You gotta have a time where you're getting up in the morning and you make your bed. And I'll give Admiral McRaven for writing his book on that's titled "Make Your Bed." That seems like such a small, mundane type of thing, but it's about creating a habit. So I give him all the accolades in the world for writing his book. I read it. It's the same type of thing. It took me like an hour and a half, if that, to read it. And I was like, man, this is just incredible because it's telling you, here's an action. You got to find something that you can do that's not difficult, that you can make it a habit. It set the alarm. You got to get out of bed at 6 in the morning and you got to make your bed. You accomplish something. You have to, things like that, Luke, they will set a spark in your mind that will, just get the endorphins flowing that, yeah, I actually did something. I made my bed. And oh, by the way, I make my bed every day. Even if I'm a single individual or I live alone in my apartment, I still make my bed. And then that sets off a chain of events the rest of the day. And you've taken time to, hey, this is how I'm going to proceed throughout each and every day. The other thing we talked about, Jared, when you do that and you have this battle rhythm and you start creating good habits, they add up. It's the small things every day that add up over time. And you'll look back, next year you'll look back to this year and you'll be like, holy cow, look how I've changed. Look how all these things that I've accomplished. It'll just be amazing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I do that sometimes, not as consistently as I should, but the act of making the bed in the morning is so much more than making the bed. First of all, it's an accomplishment. You accomplish something first. We're so reactive nowadays to our phones, our computers, to work, whatever it is. We're all reactive, and it seems like we wake up, we take a shower, or not if you work from home or doing whatever you do. But if you don't do that, that's even worse because then you're not getting in any sort of rhythm. But the act of making the bed is an accomplishment. You got something done, and that turns into doing something else. And then at the end of the day, when you get back in your bed, you're actually going back to the first thing you accomplished that day.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And it goes by, talk about another thing in the book and give some people some real tangible how to, if you will, on control. It's like overcoming, it's all about overcoming fear. But even in the context of establishing a battle rhythm, it's taking it's taking a moment to take inventory of your day and the things you can control and the things you can't control. So everything you can control, even if you just wrote a list, right? That's what you focus on. Things that you can control. So I can control whether I make the bed or not. That's totally up to me, nobody else. I can control what time I get out of bed in the morning. I can control if I'm going to smile when I walk in the door at work, if I'm going to tell people good morning and, shake somebody's hand, and be polite and kind. All types of things that an individual or myself that I can control. And as soon as you start building upon that and you get really good at the things that you can control, the things you can't just won't be as important anymore. This might all sound like it's really simple, and we just challenge you to give it a shot, especially if you're struggling to find that battle rhythm in your day. Start simple.
That's amazing advice. And yeah, listener, this is what I love the most about the book is this actually gives you a place to start. When you finish the book, like Bo, I went through it and I finished it and my mind's just started spinning. I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many things that I can do right now from this book that make it simple, make it a good place to start. I just feel like there's so many books out there that when you finish them, it's a lot of work to make small changes, which then go into big changes. This one's easy. This one I can understand and something that I can start doing right away and start seeing positive results on, even in the near future. For me, like, I know a lot of folks, struggle with weight out there as well. Like weight loss is huge right now, especially with just all the junk that's out there. And, I'm sorry how delicious food is, right? It really is. Like I think we're on, of all time, probably food is the most delicious now as it's ever been in the world. But it is something that you can control, right? And just having the mindset that, hey, I can control this can lead to better decisions. And I think just being really mindful about it. And that's another part of the book, that I think that you really illustrated well in here is, being mindful about what's going on in your surroundings and then affecting what you can control.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up about weight loss, weight control. It's funny. I'll little personal thing. I will my one of my favorite shows to watch, and I find such huge inspiration in it. It's my 600-pound life. I forget if it's on TLC or what channel it's on, but my wife and I both watch that show. Maybe a couple times a month. But what is so, having written this book and having my own journey, what is so inspiring when you find these people and they've gotten to this point in life, they're finally making a decision. There are some, they end up in it's the same physician each time that's part of the show, but there's no judgment, none of that. That is out the window. This is not about judgment. This is about getting control back of your life, really. Some of them get it right away, but then what's so fascinating is when they first see the doctor and the doctor tells them what they have to do, because he's not gonna do a surgery on them for bypass surgery until they've shown that they can lose some weight on their own, right? They start out, some of them, they don't do it. They go back to the doctor a month later and they've only lost like 4 or 5 pounds and their goal was 40 pounds. And he still keeps pushing them, right? And then at some point, and it doesn't happen for all of them, but for many of them, you can actually see it and you can hear their voice change. You can see their behaviors change. And I know it's a show, but you can, if you're watching closely, these people it's that thing that clicks in their head and they say, I can control this. This is not on my family. This is not on the doctor. This is mine. And I own it. And the next thing you know, they go back to the doc 30 days later, they've lost 50 pounds. They get their surgery, they stay on that journey, and it actually clicked in them that this is something they can control and they can get their life back. And they go from, in a year or so, they're from their 600 pounds and they're down to, a couple hundred pounds. And they did. They took ownership, they took control of their life, and they got back. And I think it's just one example. If anybody's struggling to find out, like, how do I, how in the world do I make change and do the types of things that we've written in this book, find the things you can control and start with those. Start little and do it.
Yes. And that's so real and so special, when they figure that out, and they really start taking accountability and exhibit that discipline towards making this change in their life. That's such a special thing, you know. That's amazing. What would you say, getting back to values, I was sitting here thinking, well, a company, we go in there and they have values. Hopefully they're hiring based on those values. So it's something uh, that you already show, but that doesn't happen all the time, right? So then I was thinking it comes back to your own personal values, and I know you had such great success out of the values that the military has already put together for you. Would you say that for our listeners, for listener out there, that it'd be a good idea if they don't even know where to start? Would it be a good idea to start with some of the military values, even for civilians?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's why I put it in there. Luke, you're right on it. It's if you even if you're doing a startup, a new company, and the Army values can it literally apply to any organization because it really drives home. If you have a group of people top to bottom, whether it's a small business, large business, medium-sized business, I don't think it matters, and you're exemplifying the behaviors that are talked about in the Army values, those 7 values we talked about earlier of loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, personal courage. You cannot go wrong.
No, you can't go wrong.
If in the biggest one being honor, honor as defined by the Army and is true. It's like you will live up to all of the other values. You just can't go wrong if you did not know where to start. And I think that's one of the main reasons, aside from for helping people with this book, was to say, hey, if you don't know about this, if you don't know how to do this, if you don't know how to establish values, emulate this. And then over time, you'll start to realize, say, hey, maybe these are the top 3 values that we're seeing out of people that we can write our own values then, right?
Absolutely. Well, I absolutely love it. Bo, will you tell our listeners where they can find this book? And listeners, I'm telling you, you got to go out and get this right now. It's a quick read. It's not a huge commitment, but I'm telling you, it'll make a big difference in your life, starting the moment that you finish it and put it down. So, Bo, tell our listeners where they can find it.
So it's on Amazon, Amazon.com. You can literally just type in, it's the only book out there with this title, From the Battlefield to the White House to the Boardroom, or you can type in Bo Brabo. Or if you forget that, you can go to robertbrabo.com. Down on the page, you'll see the book and a link to take you to Amazon. It's presented by my company, Hale Media Group. So it's on Hale Media Group as well. That's HAIL mediagroup.com. You can find it there. So there's multiple places to find it. And then I would just ask, in the back of the book, keep in touch. And it has the website. It has my email address, bo@robertbrabo.com. So just so people know, my real name is Robert. That's why it's Robert parentheses Bo Brabo. I've gone by Bo my whole life. And then you've got all the social media handles that are out there. Links to our podcast, Luke, are there. So what I would ask you for each listener listening in the Bo and Luke Nation, not just me, but I think you too, Luke, we want your feedback. If you don't critique me, I'm one of those individuals, and I truly, wholeheartedly accept positive criticism, even negative criticism. If you think I missed this, tell me why you think I missed this. If you think it's great, tell me why you think it's great. Because I want to know. I want to hear what you have to say. We'll talk about it. We'll do another show, Luke, and we'll talk about people's feedback and what they have to say and what they think. Because I think that's important. It's the key part of communication. I've always thought, and you read all about it, listening. So we want to listen to people listening to us. Yeah. So use those mechanisms in keeping in touch in the back of the book on sharing your feedback and let me know, let Luke know, let us know what you think. Be greatly, greatly, greatly appreciated. And in any way, because I'm transparent and honorable and want nothing but transparency with the listeners and the readers of this book. If you do a review on Amazon, be real. Just be real in what you thought. If you didn't like it, tell me you didn't like it. If you loved it, tell us you loved it. Just be honest. Because the Bo and Luke show, we cannot do better if we don't have those things to act upon that our readers and listeners are feeling.
So true. So true. Well put, man. Well put. Listeners, there you have it. You got to hit up robertbrabo.com. You can find From the Battlefield to the White House to the Boardroom on Amazon. I enjoyed it. Yeah, please be honest with your feedback. Bo, I just couldn't be happier to know you, man. I just feel very grateful to know you, and yeah, to be doing this podcast with you and to learn so much more about your life through this book, just in interactions that, I mean, I know you're awesome just because I get to interact with you, but to have that background was something that was really special for me. And I think it'll be for the readers as well. And then also, just some gratitude for our listeners. Thanks so much. This is the 4th episode. Courage to get out there and do things. And I hope that we're making a difference in people's lives. But we just wanted to tell you, thank you so much for taking the time to listen. If you get a chance, go into wherever you consume your podcasts. You can check us out, obviously, on iTunes, Spotify. I believe we're on SoundCloud. It's put out through Buzzsprout. Subscribe to that. If you subscribe to it, obviously that helps us out a little bit. Leave us a review. But we're so grateful for you taking the time out of your busy lives to listen. And I hope that Bo and I can make an impact, a positive impact on your lives. And I know all of you listeners are definitely making a positive impact on ours. So we appreciate it.
Amen. It's a wrap.
That's a wrap, Bo.
Till next time.